Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is July 31st, 2026, Friday. We are moving into August, then September, then October, then November, then December. So we are, I guess, halfway through the year, although it does feel to me like pretty much we're on just a overall downslide at this point towards the end of the year. Which, yeah, it definitely feels like I probably am not going to accomplish much more for the rest of the year, which is saying a lot. I definitely will do some warm up, and I'll scroll down the SteamDB 24-hour peak concurrent chart here while I talk. I definitely feel like my to-do list is at best maintaining, at worst getting longer. Yeah, I do accomplish things, I do stop things, finish things, but maybe a lot of that happened way more in my youth, and how it definitely feels like a lot of things just get backburnered or given up on than actually accomplished. Is that ADHD? Possibly. Is it possibly just the reality of ambition in general? As I imagine, I think a lot of other people just don't even try to do things, or they get wound up, and we all do this almost certainly, in the minutia of activities like bathing and laundry and cleaning house and stuff like that. It takes a lot of work to have a clean house and maintain a clean house, certainly, and the truth is humans never really, one individual human never really could handle that. They always had either slaves or wives that they treated like slaves, doing a lot of unpaid labor, while the man of the house usually got to work in more emotionally fulfilling roles to some extent. But yeah, my to-do list is not getting finished particularly fast, and I'm feeling peeved about that. A big part of that probably is what I spent most of yesterday, the times that I was awake, doing, which was just banging my head against trying to speed up the slideshows on the screenshot slideshows on Steam. Man, Steam's code is just crazy and wild, and I've only gotten so far as to be able to figure out a way to break the slideshow, but I have not gotten it really anywhere close to figuring out where the function call is. And I think a big part of that is I think that I am just being sent in the wrong directions, and that the way it is working seems to be possibly through manipulating the CSS of the screenshots more than actually loading the image in and out, which still probably is JavaScript that needs to be changed, but no, it may not be. There may just be something I'm totally unaware of and unfamiliar with that's going on there. When you know nothing, anything is possible, I suppose. So I've been talking about this, and I think I've come across this website before, but there's this website called SteamGameCovers.com where its fans make covers for, let's just click on Layers of Fear here, and it's covered in ads, so let's zoom in. So basically it's fans making video game covers for digital games, although in all possibility this may very well just be taking what would have been an Xbox version of Layers of the Fear and replacing the Xbox logo with a Steam logo, But yeah, my general thought was to make a website that would scan your Steam library, which I think you can do. I haven't really looked into it. And then walk people through doing something like this. The difference is I feel like a QR code here instead of a Steam logo makes a lot more sense. I feel like on the opposite version of this, you want just a big widescreen image that people could post on the wall. So it's not just going to be a piece of paper that you would slip into a plastic case. And that's where I think efforts around this, which obviously have been done, kind of fall apart, is that it is just still building too much on the idea that it needs to actually go into a plastic case that then would probably not even have a burnt disc on it or USB sticker. I mean, there really is just not any good medium at the moment to put an individual game on. It is somewhat interesting to see where this logo splits here, and that in the printing process I don't think would really work well. You're just going to have too many cases where even if you had an auto folding machine, this would bleed a little bit over to that. And so I think it is probably better just to have a full logo at the top. And my general thought would be that it would be like a QR code and then a pattern of dots that maybe spelled out Steam, but maybe did some own separate logo and didn't use Steam's logo at all, which might be better, because yeah, generally you would want to be library dynamic, and it could be a QR code to Good Old Games or any other website. And I do wonder if maybe it would make some sense to maybe have the pattern of dots diagonally go this way, but there's kind of no point in that. I definitely would get rid of this blue line. And then it becomes very questionable whether you really want any of the ESRB, or in this case PEGI, ratings or a fake barcode, which they're getting rid of barcodes in the United States, moving on to QR codes in 2027, from what I hear. So yeah, I just don't know if there really is a good reason to have copyrights and logos for something really that you would want to elevate the product and say, hey, how can we best highlight it? Now on this side, I would want a nice vertical image, which might be kind of hard to get from if you're just pulling graphics from Steam, and then another nice vertical limit image. But then it definitely takes a human touch to add the right text and squish the right text on the backside, or have screenshots of a game custom made. So I think a lot of that would go away too. And then I don't inherently love the disconnect when you look at this flatly, that between this edge and even this edge in the sides. But you probably would want some of that, so you could fold it. But then I do question whether you even really should be folding it in that way, because if it is just going to be a cardstock, maybe it should just be a fold that is only on one side, and you print it a little bit longer, and then you just have a tab that sticks out that people could grab on and pull out. Because that's what I've also been thinking about quite a bit, is like, if you were going to sell something like this, it probably would start at like, you get the minimum starter kit is going to be $200, which sounds like a ton for cardstocks, but it would include 100 games of your choosing and very possibly 3D printed plastic dividers, with your choice of dividers being A through Z on the side, or A through Z on the top, depending on how you might orient this effectively card catalog of video games. And maybe it's not 3D printed, maybe it would just be another piece of cardboard but as a divider. Certainly you can make dividers based on tags instead of alphabetical too, but that would be maybe a different option. But yeah, I've been certainly thinking about file folders and things like that. Let's see, if we were to see, can we do this by a most popular? I don't think we can, so we just go look at Among Us. A lot of these are disk labels, so it's just like if you had a printing printer and the stickers to print on discs and a CD burner, maybe that would make sense. I also feel like maybe you go with Blu-ray height, but you add some tabs just at the top of this. This is probably more of a modern logo, but I still don't like the divide here. They're clearly working off of some templates here. And if you were to just print this, obviously you're going to have to do a little bit of folding and be very careful on the cutting. Whereas if I was really going to make a business out of it, I would. Is this a added on logo from the creator, I wonder? I would definitely think about like getting an enamel printer, or at least a high glossy high quality gloss photo printer, which in fairness that might be the smarter move for most things these days, is to just pay a print shop to print things for you, and instead of owning a printer yourself. A lot of people have things like libraries in which they can do that, or Staples, places like that. It would be nice if there was some kind of coding system where you could put the Steam logo on the edge here in certain orientations, and that would be scannable. But for the QR codes and codes like QR codes that actually are scanned by iPhone and Android, the making your own code system wouldn't really work. You can see in the Blu-ray case the spine is much thinner, which, yeah, I've never been a huge fan of that, because there really is just too much thinness around the spine. Also, I suppose if I look at a Blu-ray case, I'm just pulling the first one over. Well, this is a 4K UHD. The 4K UHD logo is actually just embossed in the plastic, and the paper is just cut much shorter to be below that. I'm pretty sure that's the case. Yeah, I can feel the logo is embossed in the plastic. which is interesting. But yeah, I'm not. I would say this 4K UHD system of how things are displayed is slightly nicer on the front, at least, because it doesn't have a PEGI logo or anything like that on it. Was this the way Blu-rays always did it too? Yeah. Next movie I grabbed was The Wizard, and they've changed the cover art on that to be a 8-bit cartoony style, which makes no sense to me, since that's not what the movie is going to look like. I would have to look at like a really old Blu-ray. Here's Ghost in the Shell 2.0. That's a pretty old Blu-ray, and it's like that too. Interesting. I didn't realize that. So like the top part on Blu-rays and 4Ks just became not even part of the image, which probably does make it a lot easier to not have any bleed over effects. But yeah, noticeably, what this is not presenting, and what I was thinking about, was the two-sided print, where you would have something like this shipped flat, or you would pay a lot to have it folded, and then if it's folded, it would have to be folded and shipped in a box very carefully without it being ruined. I mean, a flat pack bubble wrap would be cheaper to ship and would make a lot more sense. Yeah. But there is no other side to it that is being shown there. You can see that there are templates here. And so these templates might be very useful if you're going to do something like that. I guess Amory case are supposed to be the DVD cases. CDs were another thought, as far as in realistic terms, a CD case would be the smallest amount of space, but it won't work on most people's shelves. And if you have a big collection and you want a big collection that looks fancy on your shelf, I just can't imagine you want CD jewel cases. I don't think anybody really enjoyed the size and the look of CD jewel cases for even music fans. They maybe took up less space in a car or something like that, but in most cases you didn't have the jewel cases in a car. You would put it in a different CD holder binder. Definitely feels like these templates could use some tweaks, but people are basically doing the same. And you'd have to be very careful here. I think Photoshop documents would print accurately, but potentially a printer, given a PNG or JPEG, will try to scale it up or down to fit the page without changing the printer settings. So yeah, I could get one of these like PlayStation, Photoshop files and work with that. Normally I like the final product to be PNGs, but this would not be the final product. I have no idea how long Steam Covers has been around. If we go back and browse the covers, it doesn't feel like there's that many games here. And so that's where having a website to start with, at the very least, if not connecting it to a print service, would really benefit. Is that compared to even what you could do ugly wise, you could cover tens of thousands of games in an automated process, compared to this, which is not going to be an automated process by any means. It's going to be whatever somebody had the passion for it. And yeah, these are all very big name games, which may or may not suit people as far as what games. And certainly we have to talk about the price there. Is that $200 to start with plus shipping is a lot of money for getting potentially $100 pieces of thick cardstock printed in a glossy on a glossy printer, photo printer, which, yeah, a 1080p image may not actually even look that good on being printed with a photo printer. But yeah, I think at minimum sales would have to be $200 per job. I just don't see a way to get around that. $2 a print is kind of a lot, and probably would have most people say, hey, I'm not going to print one for the free games or the games I only paid 99 cents for. But yeah, I can't imagine it would be any cheaper than that. And well, it would be nice to get it down to like 30 cents a print if one could. You would be doing that through cost cutting and lowering the quality of a product that is very much a premium product. But yeah, $200 in my mind is still the price of a console. Reality of the situation, unfortunately, is that $1,000 is really the price of a console. Even at that, do you want to pay a fifth of the price of a console to have a bunch of cardstocks on a shelf? Maybe, maybe not. It would be very much a potential business that would be chasing the whales and the collectors, and people that already have bookshelves, and people that are very proud of the games they have on Steam, or at least most of them. But yeah. See, the funny thing too about that idea, as far as here's another project that's mulling in the back of my mind, and I don't really want to start it because I know I'll never really finish it. But I don't know if I could make the web pages even particularly easy, because my first instinct would be to make a Violent Monkey script that would inject HTML into something else, but the reality of the situation actually is I would need to make my own web pages from scratch, basically, and host it on a website. And that's something in the, I guess you would just locally program it like the old days. You just open up Notepad and start programming it that way, or maybe use something newer like Notepad++. I imagine there's something even better than that people use. But then a lot of those softwares in the old days that would help you, quote unquote, make websites, doing a whole bunch of terrible code and didn't really help you make a website that was great. They helped you make a templated website. Speaking of help, I dived deeper in my frustration trying to increase the speed of the slideshows on Steam pages to use DuckDuckGo's AI assistant in more of a direct conversation to try to get the code to work. And yeah, I definitely didn't like it. Like, it wasn't really telling me anything different. It wasn't really working with keywords like a search result would respond to. It's telling me the code should work and the code's just not working. It doesn't feel like it is worth, in complicated scenarios, catching up an AI that very possibly is going to lie to you or tell you the wrong information to the context of the current situation. It feels like you're just spending a lot of effort to get the AI to hopefully spit out an answer. Yeah, even regular search with the AI responses was very bad in one search I did. I was looking up what should be a basic yes or no question of, can you assign a variable as a number? Since my suspicion is that the slideshow has 5,000 inputted as its delay, 5,000 milliseconds, 5 seconds. Can you just define a variable called 5,000, numeral 5000, to actually equal a numeral 500? And the answer in JavaScript is no, you cannot do that. You can do that in other languages using define, but it's a preprocessor thing that gets implemented as something is compiled. JavaScript is not compiled, and so preprocessor things don't exist. Took me 3 or 4 searches to very specifically word my question as a sentence instead of just keywords before the AI search result said, no, you cannot do this. Variables only can have a few symbols and letters in their name. Before then, 3 or 4 searches was telling me, yes, you can do this completely different thing. And yeah, that is a huge problem with AI in general, is that its eagerness to return a result / a positive result is just way too high. It has been programmed certainly not to say, I don't know, I need more context, I don't know what you're talking about, all you typed in was 2 keywords that don't even make any sense to me. Which for an AI to recognize that a couple of keywords could mean a lot of different things would be for AI to also recognize and realize that their entire logical chain in which they're built on is flawed, and because it's all based on neural networking of keywords. What words are most likely to be said after the previous words? Yeah. Wouldn't that be really crazy if a human thought that way too? Like, you would definitely think there's something wrong with a person that is literally just got a what is the likelihood of the next word being this algorithm going in their head, and so instead of understanding or contemplating anything, they are just saying words based on what is most common. Yeah, that would definitely fall under the category of being described as just parroting and mimicking. Severely mentally disabled person might do that. So yeah, I'm not particularly happy with AI. I will give it credit, like the synopsises on DuckDuckGo, because a lot of these results do tell me enough of what I need to know without me having to click on a super user web page, which is usually what is the first result, and deal with their terrible interface. That being said, if super user's interface was just quicker and easier to use and not a hideous visual mess, then that wouldn't be a problem. And I think that is part of the problem in general, is that there is just a lot of websites out there that might have useful information but look awful, and then there's a lot of websites out there that look nice and don't have a lot of information. Reddit, I would say, is its own problem and system, as far as there's probably good information amongst Reddit, but there's also a ton of just garbage on different subreddits of Reddit. So it's very much dependent on the subreddit and who runs and curates the subreddit. I showed in a previous stream the project from Cyan, the makers of Myst, showing off a project that didn't get publisher funding called Anglerfish, codename like Anglerfish. That video was part of a event that they had this year. They had in the past couple of years called Mysterium, just a fan event, and they had the two young kids that I guess are now really in charge of Cyan, showing off projects that just are not in active development at this point. Although there is one project that is in active development, although what does that really mean? It is certainly a terrible statement as far as the game industry that Myst, the best-selling game ever, is still not being run by a company that can self-fund games, and Valve really is the only video game company that has been able to not create games for years or wait until they make a really good game to release a game, because they have the ton of extra income from Steam itself, which maybe it should have just been a case that there would have been a dozen more online stores competing against each other to fund game companies. Yeah, but so I watched that presentation. Interesting enough, but I don't really have a huge amount of faith that Cyan is going to actually be able to come out with a game that's really that relevant, having laid off several people, I believe, a couple years ago. I don't think there's that many people at the company. The new kids are using Unreal Engine. There is possibly an Epic Games Store funding that might be going in there, if I saw the icon correctly, in that project that they are still working on, which might help. But yeah, Myst 3, Myst 4, Myst 5, all made by Ubisoft, and Myst 1 through 5 in their original versions, at least all running on a game engine called the Plasma engine that nobody at the company even knows how it works. They've moved over to the Unreal Engine, which makes a lot of sense. Although it would be nice to see them go to the Godot engine. I don't think a jump there would really help them that much. They are going to re-release the Myst books again, and those have been hard to get, so I probably end up spending way too much money to get those for the first time. Although my book collection really is a dust collector collection, and that I will never crack the spine and actually read the books. And they have like a Myst Lego set, but I think it's something they build themselves, so they just like buy the pieces in bulk from Lego, and thus the price is really, really expensive. Yeah, they didn't have anything new or amazing to announce. The bigger announcement, almost certainly from Cyan, is that Rand Miller will just retire. Like, he's old enough, and yeah, I don't think he really needs to be a figurehead or around in the office. One of the things in the presentation they also talked about is how they just like play disc golf every day, which certainly explains why they probably aren't producing games fast enough. Is that if you have your entire development team playing disc golf every day, they are having a little too much fun on company time. Yeah. And it definitely feels like, I would say, that they are probably focusing still very much on having everything connected to the Myst universe in one way or the other, which probably makes a lot of sense, because let's face it, the games that aren't connected to the Myst universe or aren't sold as being connected to the Myst universe have sold a lot worse. There's been no talk about remaking Myst 3. They did talk about patching Myst 3, Myst 4, and Myst 5, which is the best they can do, considering they don't really have the source code or understand those games because they didn't create those games. There is definitely an alternate universe where, had they not spent a ton of time trying to make an MMO too early, or had the original version of Uru actually succeeded as this hugely successful World of Warcraft like MMO, Cyan Worlds would have been a huge player in the video game industry. Yeah, and you could have seen Cyan Worlds be what Microsoft and Xbox became, or even what Ubisoft became in its heyday. One of the things that might be the problem with Cyan Worlds, and certainly would be interesting to think about that, is they probably failed to license well enough. And certainly they're not doing like the Japanese game company thing where you just flood the market with Myst games of all different kinds. Although they did kind of consistently have remakes of the same games over and over again. They didn't flood the market. Yeah, they lost a decade, I would say, at least, trying to make an MMO too early, and in that time. They also kind of handed over the reins of Myst to Ubisoft for the last 3 games. Then they went quiet after Myst 5 for a pretty long time. It's been maybe 10 or 15 years since they've actually felt like they were actually in active development, and I don't know if they actually are in active development at the moment, instead of just being a holding company. They rested on their laurels, basically. Which actually, I don't know what a laurel is, come to think of it. Will say, while I am claiming that all I did yesterday was frustrate myself trying to work on the speeding up of the slideshows, it's not exactly true. I beat the final boss in Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. Still, I think a pretty terrible game. I was at like level 25, and there is just no content in that game that would get you up to level 33 even, let alone 50, let alone level 99 before you get to that final boss. It certainly would have helped if I was a few more levels higher. I definitely died once, which that is not a fight you want to die in, because it's a 2-part fight with a whole bunch of text before and in the middle and then after the fight. So real time waster, time stretching. But yeah, the game seems to have some post-game content that I might actually play, but only really because I want to see if I could get through the 100 floor challenge. But yeah, the actual experience that most people would have from the beginning to the credits, absolutely downright awful in Thousand Years Door. Just a lot of walking back and forth, a lot of wasting the player's time. It's crazy to have such an abridged baby's first RPG game and still stretch it out to 60 hours and make it a bad 60 hours at that point. Here's also, right before the final boss, a lot of puzzles that require you to do things you've never really been required to do in the game before that point. And then there's some difficult platforming and puzzling to get to the final boss. Which, yeah, all that really does is stretch the game out. You get 1 experience for beating the final boss, 2, which sure would have been nice if you gained at least a level from that. 100 experience is needed to level up. I'm playing Pokemon TCG Pocket. The new expansion is out. I don't know if there's anything particularly special about the cards that are coming out right now. With this expansion, it seems like a lot of them may just be cards you already had with new artwork, but they may actually have different text as far as what they do. So we're back into a more active element with Pokemon TCG Pocket, and I'm also still playing Memento Mori, and we are having an event right now with the crossover event in particular, which makes the event a little bit more special. I'm trying to make as much progress as possible. I'm also trying to throw in as many of the crystals I have to get the summer characters, because yeah, there's somewhat not guaranteed that next summer will even be around, by which I mean Memento Mori may be shut down before next summer, before they would unlock those characters again. And I want to get at least 1 copy of those characters on each account. there is definitely a new level that I'm starting to approach in Memento Mori, in that I'd have to get 5 to 10 copies of the more limited rarity characters. I think that is going to prove to be a lot more difficult if it goes down that path. Like, that is where you go from being at level 300, 370, I think is where I am at right now, 370, 380. That's where you start going from level 380 to level 400 and 500, is that you have to have a lot of extra leveled up limited rarity characters. I don't know if there's any other system that unlocks that would let your levels go any higher. So yeah, I did finish Paper Mario. I watched an episode of Solo, not Solo, Silo, which week to week probably is the better way to watch it, but it's also kind of not great. Like, it really feels like it's one of those shows where you want to watch it week to week, then you want to watch it again. And I don't know if it's really good enough to watch twice, to like marathon the whole thing. It's been slow progress with Silo. I saw Bleach: 1,000 Years Blood Arc has another new season. They're doing like 24, maybe they're gonna do full 5 seasons of just redoing the ending of Bleach. I thought it was going to really just be 1 season to wrap it up. This will probably get updated, the hardware and software survey, by the next stream. And yeah, I'm not doing follow list cleanup anymore. I've got the follow list down to 2,313 games. But I am doing a wish list cleanup. I'm going to add categories and start thinking about the categories a little bit more. Although, I don't know if the categories themselves are going to be that helpful. And I don't know if there's really a value in making categories based on tags alone. But at the very beginning, I was able to eliminate things with hentai or sexual content or nudity and just go through those games and eliminate them from the wish list, because let's face it, I can't make any content on any of those games, and I don't have any real desire to play a game that I can't make content on. Let's look at the numbers for Halo campaign involved. It's really crazy to know that there is no co-op or multiplayer in that game. Like, that pretty much guaranteed that it was going to be a failure. And I guess maybe that's why it's called Campaign Involved, as it has just the campaign in it. Octopath Traveler franchise sale may not be a terrible sale. Yeah. Let's see if we scroll back a little bit. I know that game Rydo was supposed to have come out. It's not being shown. So let's go see if we can look at that, because I was trying to keep an eye on that. Maybe it got delayed. There are also games on my wish list that are just still in early access from years ago, and obviously are just never gonna be finished, and those are other things on the wish list to clean up. And there's just a lot of games that are on the wish list that, if I apply a more realistic filter to them. I think I can lose to get what is about 6,000 games down to 3,000 games I potentially would actually want to buy. Yeah. So I have been doing a little bit of that, but again, much in the same situation as the as I'm losing my train of thought as I speak. Much like how the follow list is right now, now that it's been cleaned up, my wish list is now full of, it has always been full of a lot of games that are very far past the threshold of considering them good enough to buy. So now it is very much getting down to the point of thinking about what do I actually want to buy or think I actually would buy, and what do I not want to buy. I was able to like eliminate a lot of chess games because I seriously doubt I will ever want to play another chess game in my life, and visual novels, because there's just no way to make content around visual novels. Now, I am doing this in all honesty with the possibility that maybe there's a kid that would want some kind of game, but honestly, their wish list should just be on their profile at that point. Here we have what I think the tags could look like if you were to print them out. Is that you would just have this kind of image on a either piece of plastic divider or even a cardboard divider, and it would be either on the side or on the top. On the top would make sense if you're putting it in a drawer like a card catalog, or even on the top if you just don't like it on the side. On the side makes more sense if it's like DVDs with their spine facing out. I could also see doing both, having tags on top and then letters on the side. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here that may be copyrighted by Steam, maybe not, that you'd have to rethink. Like the actual thumbnails for an actual game would be considered ad copy, and by my understanding of the laws, not legally copyrightable. So like this, and this are not copyrighted images. It'd be kind of crazy to try to enforce a copyright on a lot of these images anyways, because they are for promoting and selling the games. That being said, Disney itself would be trademarked, and so if you presented yourself as having working for Disney or being Disney, that is totally something you'd get sued for. But yeah, this game, How Many Dudes to Be the Gorilla, is the I think, or it's not just gorillas, it's also 1,000 toddlers. It's just that meme game made in video game form, which in fairness isn't a terrible idea. I do question if this isn't a little bit of streamer bait, but I also wouldn't say that every single game goes from has to be serious or it's streamer bait. I'd say it's very possible that this is just a silly game. and we can leave it at that and not have to describe it further or dismiss it based on a description. Yeah. Rydo did come out. It's positive with 27 reviews so far. So what this is you play as a chicken and you get letters, and the letters help you unlock the puzzles and go further in the world, and you get into other places where you have to solve other kinds of puzzles. They're all word puzzle type things. For the most part, I think they're crosswords is the main challenge they're trying to fill in, but you can see how these crosswords are somewhat small to it's not asking you to spend an hour solving puzzles, solving the crossword puzzle, and then the world and the 3D environment interacts in this. For instance, this puzzle here, where you have box circled, you only have 3 rings to start with, and so you spell box and it makes the box actually appear in the 3D world. That lets you cross over to get the next ring, I believe, which would be pipe. So then you would have to find pipe spelled in this P-I-P-E backwards there. And so then that opens a pipe and you jump into the pipe, you get another letter, which then you look at the 5 letter, which I don't know what M-E something something E could be. So you would just then have to look at like all the M's here to spell something. Merge, M-E-R-G-E, diagonally, which obviously merges something. Then it would give you one more letter to get bridge, which lets you go over the bridge. But there's actually 2 bridges, and so you go over the first bridge, I think, and you get another circle, so you then can spell out bridges, which then lets you exit this puzzle and solve it, which is a fairly creative thing. I saw the cracking, the cryptic Sudoku and cryptic crossword players playing this game, and it caught my attention. They've stopped playing blueprints. I don't know if they've just completely feel like they've done as much as they can, which in fairness they probably have, but they've started to play, move on to some other games they were playing. It is certainly questionable as I go through the wish list cleanup as far as just how many Sudoku games should also stay around, in that unless you're putting a really good twist on Sudoku and also presenting pretty easy Sudokus, I don't want to make content where I'm spending hours upon hours trying to get a single crossword solved Sudoku. So yeah, you could get the original Octopath Traveler for $18, Octopath Traveler for $23.99, and Octopath Traveler 0 for $32.49. So yeah, while things are on sale, this is very much a Square Enix thing, where and Japanese company thing in general, where the prices aren't that cheap. Don't know why we had a blank tab there. There's been more stories, certainly, about the low number of people playing on Steam. Halo campaign involved. You can see that from their all-time peak of 25,000 players, having launched just a couple days ago, they are already down to 14,000 players. I saw somebody make a video. Apparently the first Halo game didn't have the same kind of running as this does, and so they showed a video where they were just straight up running through and level without actually fighting and shooting anyone, which my vague recollection of how Halo usually played out was that you would get bogged down in a gunfight and would have to kill everybody in an area before you could feasibly make it to the next area. I don't think it ever forced you to defeat all the enemies in an area, but that was very much the design of it. It may very well be the case that Halo Campaign Evolved doesn't show us if there's any actual gameplay trailers here, instead of just cinematic trailers. That might be part of the red flag too, is that there's just a ton of cinematics even in this one labeled gameplay. But yeah, this might really just prove the lack of interest in the single player experience and the campaign experience around Halo that probably always existed, compared to the massive enthusiasm for multiplayer. It does just feel very weird to not have multiplayer in this game. I definitely see people saying there's just no reason why you would play this instead of playing the Master Chief Collection. I think someone said that they hoped that this would be somewhat foundational and helpful to making a Halo 2 remaster. And the gameplay trailer here, had I seen this one, really highlights that they knew the gameplay sucked. There is way too few sections here where you're actually being shown actual gameplay instead of just being shown a lot of cutscenes. Were there missions in Halo where you actually flew around in any form? It's going to be a mean thing to say, I think, just off the top of my head, but you know, all these layoffs may very well lead to a lot of people who were brought into the game industry to make games like Halo leaving the gaming development industry, gaming development in general, and we might go back to what gaming was before Halo, which would be different. I'm not going to say it's good or bad, but it certainly would be a return to what was the norm. Because yeah, I imagine the talent at Bungie just spread throughout several other companies, and the desire to make Halo-like games led to a lot of people being hired and trained to make things like this. Certainly there's enough people that are game developers that almost certainly were influenced and enthralled by games like Halo and then focused their attention on trying to make games and learning how to program games like that. Certainly the Unreal Engine wouldn't be anywhere as popular as it is if it weren't for first-person shooters becoming popular. And yeah, I think it probably is a case that there's a decent amount of somewhat deluded developers who want to make their first game be like Halo or be a first-person shooter. And they're obsessed with that when really they should be making something simpler and probably something more creative. Like, you definitely, for your first couple of games as an independent or still in school developer, should be trying to do things new and creative, because the odds are by the time you get hired you may very well be doing something boring and repetitive. We don't have any refurbed Steam Decks. Yeah, pricing seems like it's just going to keep on going up forever. So if you could get a refurbed Steam Deck, I would still recommend it. I am a little scared, certainly, though, that I'll get that email to buy a Steam machine, and if it happened today, I definitely would tell a couple people, hey, I'll buy this if you want it, for my nieces and nephews, but otherwise I'm not going to buy it. But also know that if I don't buy this now, it's likely that they won't be getting any kind of new PC till 2030. Yeah, they told me that I wouldn't get an email until 2027, so early 2027. But yeah, it's very reasonable. 2020, 30, 2031 would be the next time computers would be reasonably priced. But yeah, I'm just not really budgeted at the moment to spend an extra $1,000. Probably as we enter the halfway point of the year, this is when the seasonal affective disorder starts to kick in too, and so I wouldn't be surprised if I just start to feel a little bit more pessimistic. Instead of trying to be realistic. Scroll down the Steam top 100 games. Really don't have Steam Deck anything to say here. It doesn't feel like anything has really changed. Yeah, I've noticed I've even been spending less time checking Amazon.com, so I still check Slick Deals 5, 10, 20 times a day, but you kind of have to if you want to actually get those deals in time. Like the humidifier I got, dehumidifier, not a humidifier, that would be the last thing I need, was $75, and then that Slick Deal went away and came back a couple days later for $100, which still is a decent price, but it's not as decent, not as good of a price. One thing I was thinking about, I wasn't thinking about until somebody mentioned it to me, was, yeah, your refrigerator is dropping water into a pan that is in the bottom of a refrigerator all the time and just letting that water evaporate in your house, increasing the humidity in your house. I never really thought it would be that big of an effect, but maybe it is. There is definitely something weird about my old house as far as I think air is just getting in and humidity is getting in, because it is definitely just not as comfortable as I'd like it to be as far as the humidity scale goes. And this certainly is also the time where I feel like I need to run a dehumidifier, but also it is the time when the electricity bill is going to go skyrocket through the roof. It's going to be very high, I think, this month. Then I got one bill that I thought had a late fee on it, and turned out it didn't have a late fee on it, and it was just written in a confusing way to mention the late fee if you don't pay it in time. And so I spent more time than I wish I had on customer service complaining about this late fee. But it is also a weird situation where it definitely feels like this bill is due on a certain date, and they don't bother to mail out the bill until it's like 30 days past the due date, which is crazy. And then the late fee kicks in, I think, 30 days past the due date, 60 days past the due date, I guess, or maybe not. It's definitely a confusing billing labeling, and I think is intentionally designed to be confusing, or just designed by idiots. Alright, well, I guess that's as much warm-up as we're going to get, so let's jump into the video games Chronicle articles. I haven't worked on replacing the news macros. I'm still jumping around between different Violent Monkey script projects, trying to learn as much as possible to have as much foundation mentally and then intellectually to build a better macro to open the news up. A big part of that is just going to be handling arrays, big arrays that need to be handled correctly. Okay, let's go through Video Games Chronicle articles. Dragon's Dogma 2 Dark Arisen has received a hard mode update with details shared in the new Q&A. I guess check out this article for fans of that game. Mortal Shell 2 beta is available for free now. Progress carries over to the full game. I don't feel like that game I don't feel like Mortal Shell as a game got as much coverage as it probably deserved, but it does kind of feel like we are potentially just getting to I'm losing my train of thought because I'm looking at the headline here instead of talking. It feels like a lot of games are running into that same problem over and over again, where they just aren't getting enough coverage. People aren't reviewing it, or I'm not following the people who are reviewing games, and in general none of them seem like they're advertising well enough, which is funny because people are always complaining about advertising on websites, YouTube, Facebook, Reddit. So why aren't bigger companies that have actually decent products to sell advertising through Google AdSense or something else? Or why isn't Google AdSense doing a better job of actually advertising these games? I think maybe the laziness of the directs and just not paying for E3 sunk in way too much in game publishers and game developers' minds, and their advertising campaigns, when they do spend money, tend to be focused on print or places where gamers aren't actually even looking too much. I think there probably is also a false thought that the lies of how successful print advertising are still being believed more than the lies of how successful online advertising is, which The reality is most advertising is pretty unsuccessful, and advertisers are lying about how successful it will be. So here we have a quote, are we dead ass? Question mark in quotes. Fans react to an official AI generated Stellar Blade music video. Stellar Blade Blood Rain's AI generated music video is tempering fan excitement. Yeah, this almost certainly isn't the right move, even when you are creating a virtual character in this character, and they are almost certainly an AI robot. I still don't think that gives you any extra special permission to have an AI generated music video come out as a form of advertising. Song is "Wanna Be in Love." I could see what they were thinking here, but maybe in Korea AI pushback just hasn't been as big of a thing. Maybe it is a case also that they are just over obsessing about an AI disclosure. The visual style is unmistakably AI generated. Is the actual singing AI generated? Yeah. So yeah, here's a thing we probably shouldn't hit play on, but let's hit play on it anyways. I'm not going to hear any of the audio. But yeah, it definitely feels like they have nothing to show. And if this was the case that the voice actor was actually a K-pop singer, I think it would definitely have made a lot more sense to just have the voice actor sing the song. This is probably a great example of where AI is just being pushed / thought of as a good thing by developers, and the disconnect between what people want and what the developers are doing is just widening further and further. Yeah, I will say this video does look pretty bad, although I don't know if that's 100% because it's AI generated or if it is just that they fed in some really early art assets into AI or into some creation. It'd be funny if actually none of this was created with AI. I don't think that this endears this new character more to an audience. Although maybe it does in Korea. Maybe this is just received really well in Korea. I wouldn't immediately cry that there's a guaranteed problem here. There was similar hesitations that came up around the thought that there might be censorship, or a lot of censorship, in the PlayStation version of the first Stellar Blade. This is one of those examples too of showing what not to do, as far as you don't touch the mic stand when singing. That's why, for the most part, mic stands like that are props, which then at that point I guess you can touch the mic if you want to. and they've gone to a lot of just headset microphones. Yeah, it is very possible you just clicked the wrong button and added the AI disclaimer. There is a real danger, though, that Shift Up is just testing the water to use AI in its game development even further. And they, at a certain level, I almost can't blame them, because the reality of the situation is Shift Up is a pretty small company, or at least they were just a couple of years ago. Like, they had to have Sony's funding to make Stellar Blade, and it's amazing they were even successful at that. Before Stellar Blade, all they had made is my favorite game, mobile game, Destiny Child, which they shut down, which was a lewd gotcha game, which got a lot of money because of that. And then Nikkei Got Us a Victory is another mobile game, the second mobile game, which is a lewd gotcha game. So to go from 2 lewd gotcha games to a 3D game at all is kind of amazing, particularly in the short amount of time they were able to do it. There is definitely some of the stuff you may not really be accurate in describing as AI, as this in the old days might be better described as just compositing, because there's nothing really artificially intelligent in taking a fake 3D model and compositing it into a real image, which I imagine a lot of this actually was very much that. They probably just had a body double stand in, or nobody stand in. Might be better for nobody to stand in. Took a lot of video and photos and then just composited in a 3D character. I would hate to see that actually happen. In the actual game, though. Also kind of promoting K-pop Demon Hunters and Derpy the Tiger. I guess it's that. So this really goes to show where K-pop and Korean K-pop fandom is so big. I imagine Shift Up is going to get a lot of pushback from this, and hopefully they can receive that message gently and correct for that, and not do something crazier than this. If this is the one stumbling block and the big mistake around Stellar Blade's Blood Rain, then that's not that big of a mistake, even though it is AI generated stuff. But it certainly sets a precedent for bigger mistakes to be made. Here we have a quote: ESO is here to stay. Elder Scrolls Online Studio is working closer with Bethesda to build the future following layoffs. ZeniMax Online lost hundreds of employees this month following the Xbox cuts. This is one of those statements that I don't really believe. I feel like it is very much the case that Elder Scrolls Online is going to go into a maintenance mode, and a lot of the people who are making content for Elder Scrolls Online are either getting laid off or shifting over to actually finishing the next single player Elder Scrolls experience. Which, yeah, that is really the only thing I could imagine could possibly happen. I've heard people say that your general audience of fans of Skyrim definitely are not interested in what Elder Scrolls Online offers compared to Skyrim. They want a single player experience. I'll just leave it there. A Lego PlayStation is reportedly coming in October with a limited time Astrobot set. Astrobot set gift with purchase is said to be joining the 1,911 piece set. This doesn't look Lego-y, this PlayStation. And if that is true, I don't know what the set would look like or what would make it interesting, but we'll just have to wait and see. It does kind of make sense that a Lego PlayStation 1 might be made. But yeah, when you look at what it looks like, it's not much. Let's see. EA says that all regulatory approvals for its Saudi Public Investment Fund acquisition have been obtained and the deal should be done next week. This $55 billion buyout is expected to be completed on August 4th. So, yeah. This is seemingly going to happen. A terrible video game company is now going to be taken over and owned by a public investment fund of a country that is run by a terrible monarchy. I'm being very cautious as how I phrase that. We will see if Saudi Arabia runs EA any better than EA has run it. And I'll leave it at that. Sony says it's been talking to retailers about its disc-free future, suggests that US retailers may still sell codes in the box. I wouldn't be surprised if there is actually just a very different experience in the United States retail versus around the world retail, in that maybe the sales numbers are just too small to care about any other country having discs in boxes, or having codes in boxes on shelves, whereas maybe in Japan you'll just see PlayStation aisles becoming really, really small and that they're just selling accessories. For the most part, I think Walmarts and storefronts in the United States too have pretty much lowered the number of actual games available down to almost nothing and are just selling accessories and consoles and gift cards too. And yeah, I don't know if any of the retail brick and mortar stores even care enough to make the threat that we're going to pull PlayStations from our shelves and not sell controllers or accessories if you don't sell as discs. GameStop would be the one company that would really care, and they don't seem to be in a position to really care either, or do anything about it if they do care. Sony did break its silence. The quote here is, "We are going to cautiously move this forward," end quote. Sony says it hears the PlayStation disc backlash but will continue its plans, which is perhaps a very soft way of saying screw you. we're still doing what we planned on doing all along. And yeah, almost certainly this is perhaps one of the best examples of if you're gonna say something that people aren't gonna like, just going quiet for a month and then putting out a statement after a month and hoping it would have died down to say, hey, we're still planning on doing exactly what we said we were going to do. If anybody was upset and was going to boycott Sony, their only response to this response should be, we're still going to boycott Sony. If somebody was on the fence, they should be even more mad now that they've been heard and ignored. So yeah, I don't think this kind of statement actually helps anybody other than the investors and shareholders. Just saying, yeah, we're still, when they could have kind of said nothing. This was a Q&A session in the earnings announcements where they actually had to, somebody actually had to respond, though, to a shareholder. Otherwise, I think Sony would have just stayed silent, and I guess Sony still technically has stayed silent in that they haven't put out any kind of official press release or anything like that. Next, we have a major Switch update adding Mario Sunshine and an unreleased Virtual Boy game. Switch Online will now add new features and games next month. We'll add new features and games. I'm trying to figure out what the features actually could be, though. After releasing unreleased games for the Virtual Boy, that's because there are basically no more Virtual Boy games to release. Let's see. Nestor's Funky Bowling, Panic Bomber, SD Gundam Dimension War, Space Squash, Virtual Fighter, Virtual Lab, Virtual League Baseball, and Waterworld are the only ones that have been confirmed to be coming. And the Waterworld, for instance, would have to be licensed again. Yeah, the new feature, I guess, is the ability to customize screen color. And I guess this, adding Super Mario Sunshine, fixes the problem of it being available for a brief second in the 3D All-Stars collection and then disappearing again. Which Mario Sunshine is worth playing once, I would say, particularly if you're just going to rush through it. I wouldn't spend too much time on it, though, because it is notably one of the worst 3D platforming Mario games of the Mario 3D platforming games, although there might be worse now. No, I guess probably would be Sunshine is the worst, and then Mario Galaxy 2 is probably the second worst, and that's not really terrible games. I think the biggest complaints about Mario Sunshine is just that it plays very weirdly and it is set in a very different location, so it broke the mold too much for people's taste at the time. Yeah, I might play Mario Sunshine on my Steam Deck, but I probably would prefer to focus on something else instead. Moving on, Splatoon Raiders tops Japan's physical charts as Mario Kart World and Tomodachi Life pass major milestones. They've sold 474,000 physical copies in the first weekend of Japan, which definitely, I think, highlights where physical copies are still very much wanted, at least for Nintendo games in Japan and probably around the world. I think particularly when you get to handheld devices, that doesn't inherently mean you want a handheld device that has to be connected to the internet to download a game. You want to be able to swap in cartridges, even if that is really just because of nostalgia reasons. Because yeah, let's face it, if you were to instead just download several Switch 2 games onto a Switch internal hard drive or SD card, there'd be plenty of room for several games instead of swapping cartridges. Let's see, WWE 2K26 is free to play for all Xbox users this weekend to coincide with SummerSlam. Okay. All of the WWE events these days, I think, are pretty much done in Saudi Arabia. So the big events were always pay-per-view events anyways. So as a casual fan who watched wrestling for a year or two, you would have events like SummerSlam happen, and then the next Raw's War on Monday would recap the events of SummerSlam, where all the championship fights happened and the belts changed, and then you'd have people defending their championship on Raw's War with none of the titles really changing hands. But yeah, you definitely got screwed if you weren't paying for the pay-per-view. And I think you get screwed even more now because pay-per-views are probably super expensive. But yeah, those are the big events, as SummerSlam and things like that. You want to go to those events. You really don't want to go to just a Wednesday night wrestling event, because it's unlikely that anything big is going to happen. Let's see. After last year's Croc Legends of the Gobos remaster, Croc 2 is now getting the same treatment. Croc 2 Kingdom of the Gobos is set to be released by the end of the year. I'd have to assume Croc 2 was programmed with just about the same code as Croc 1, so it would make a lot of sense that if you can remaster the first game, it only takes a little bit more effort to remaster the second game in those situations. They have 19 minutes of Gears of War E-Day Horde Siege mode gameplay, if you want to see that on Video Games Chronicles. That's not really what I would consider news. The Witcher 3 voice actor Doug Cockle, is how I'm going to pronounce his name, shares a photo of himself reading dialogues for Songs of the Past expansion. Okay. Is that really news? Oh. Yeah. You might as well just not make an article when your article is, hey, somebody tweeted a photo of themselves. We're getting down to pretty pathetic, scraping the bottom of the barrel news at that point. The Final Fantasy VII Revelation director says he's working on arranging some kind of physical edition, but he can't confirm the details. Naoki Hamaguchi says it would be a shame if physical release stopped in the future. That was a quote from a while ago. Yeah. Asha Sharma says Xbox expects to return to growth by this time next year, as it reports an annual decline in revenue. Xbox content revenue decreased 10% in the last quarter, with hardware revenue declining 13%. don't know how they plan on hitting a return to growth. There are probably still plenty of people that could be laid off, but that doesn't mean growth. It doesn't mean more sales, more gross revenue. Yeah. I guess I'll leave it at that. And that'll bring us to the Gematsu articles, which, yeah, we'll start looking at that. We've got Clover Pit being shown, rated very positively. Do I have the hotkeys enabled? Yes, I do. Good. That would have really sucked if we had to reload all the pages again. This is the point in the stream where I pull out my keyboard for the hotkeys. I added the hotkeys and now that's created its own issues, certainly. Clover Pit is coming to the PS5, Switch 2, PS4, and Switch on August 13th. Interesting. Unfortunately, it is really the case, though, that when these games, by the time they do come to a console, they've typically already run out of steam, and I think Clover Pit only had a week or two of a lot of steam, a lot of hype around it. Genshin Impact version 7.0 update Everwinter Without Mercy launches August 12th. Star Sand Island is apparently in early access. Let's go down and see this. August 18th. Well, now that my fall list is kind of smaller, it's not that smaller, I'm going to put that on the fall list instead of the wish list. This is another one of these cases too where a Stardew Valley simulator may not be really something I would want to play. You know, it does seem like there's a decent amount of other stuff going on around here. It definitely feels like the farming aspect still is central, and that is something that I think I'm going to probably avoid in most games. I just don't have any desire to do farming in video games, whether it's actual farming of plants or farming of just small enemies that you're defeating for XP. But yeah, the headline here is Star Sand Island launches August 18th. Yeah, and guess I'll leave it at that. Sony's into physical game disc protection to cautiously move forward despite strong opinions. Which, yeah, we'll again leave it on that. To contrast that, during almost certainly the same shareholders meeting, they probably announced that the PS5 shipments have topped 95.3 million. Wouldn't it be ironic if it never actually makes it to 100 million units? Which I guess is possible since only 1.6 million shipped during the last 3 months. But yeah, if there was just a hard boycott and a cutoff, or just a lack of available parts. What's funny about this, to me, is in this Rampocalypse, the making of discs is probably the easiest thing you could do. You could say, hey, it's kind of hard to get the console, but it sure is easy to get the games. Buy the games now and play them later. As a thought, as a push in the pitch. Nobody's really also talking about the idea that disc going all digital is going to wreck libraries. And it's going to wreck poor people by far. So you may very very well find that the bottom falls out. And that would be a fairly Japanese thing, to just assume that everybody is as rich as people in Tokyo, and that they live in circumstances where you can be, and kind of have to be, fairly spendy in Tokyo to just keep yourself from losing your mind. Yeah, there's a ton of entertainment that you can't have inside your tiny little apartment in Tokyo, and there's not really a lot of food opportunities to eat and cook inside your tiny little apartment. So a lot of times there's not even a bath, or sometimes not even a toilet in your individual apartment in Tokyo. So being out and about is the only lifestyle that's really available to you, which makes people feel like they are and look like they are much more consumers than they really should be or would want to be. But yeah, I could see a Japanese company really assuming that that is the same around the world, when obviously people in Africa tend, in the poorest parts of Africa, tend not to be eating out 3 meals a day or buying expensive video games and things like that. Moving on, GameCube classics adding Super Mario Sunshine and Virtual Boy, D-Hopper, and Space Racers. So yeah, these characters I think are introduced in Mario Sunshine, and they show up again in Mario, Paper Mario 1000 Year Door, which, yeah, they're not super annoying or anything, but they are yet again a character you just don't really know or care about. Even here you have Princess Peach in a different kind of dress. And this guy actually shows up in 1000 Year Door too. He's disappeared from history, I think. For the most part, these releases are historically relevant and maybe undercutting a little bit of piracy out there, but probably not that much. But they're not really good games, and not things I think kids would really spend more than 5 minutes on. These Virtual Boy games, a lot of them not worth playing. Some of them worth playing, but then you have to put up with the hideous red appearance. And almost certainly what you're seeing on the Switch version, or any kind of emulated version of the Virtual Boy, is not going to be as sharp or as interesting looking as what this is. An older ad, it looks like. Maybe not. I don't know. It felt like an older ad. It's just advertising what they already had, I guess. We have a visual novel, which the thing there is visual novels are probably not going to make it to my wish list going forward. A drama-like adventure called Seasons of Books and Keys has been announced for the Switch and PC. It's an adaptation of a Honobu Yonizawa mystery novel, which, yeah, there's almost certainly thousands of novels that would just not be familiar to me or anyone in the Western world. I guess that is the case. This is one of those weirder paths where you're seeing an actual novel, not a light novel, not a manga, being turned into a visual novel game. So that probably does happen every now and then. But typically it is the other way around, in that you see mostly original visual novels get turned into anime or something else. Speedrunners 2 King of Speeds launches on September 3rd. It's a competitive party platformer game. It's time for me to adjust in my chair. There's definitely something really wrong with my chair that I need to figure out and fix, because it is uncomfortable, particularly in one spot. Yeah, let's leave it at that. So here we have a visual novel from 2025. Say Toho. Well, it's not a visual novel, it's an RPG, turn-based bullet hell tagged game. Well, whatever it is, it's a Toho game, and I'm pretty much just dismissing all Toho games, even overwhelmingly positive ones. Fantasy Maiden Wars Dream of the Stray Dreamer for Switch is now available in the West. Here's Speedrunners 2. Could have made a short on that. I guess we could do that. Let's see. I was going to again try to stream earlier. The last stream where I did stream earlier in the morning, I think did get more views. But yeah, I'm never going to be consistent about that. It's just too easy to roll over and go back to sleep. Luminous Remastered is now available for iOS and Android. You can see it's overwhelmingly positive on Steam. So it is interesting to see a 2018 game also be able to be ported to iOS and Android, although Luminous Remastered is probably not that demanding. Though visually it did have a lot of effects on it. Saber Interactive announces Rideshare Simulator for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, which sounds like yet another game which is just simulating doing an actual job that may not even be a job that much longer. Which, yeah, honestly, if we're gonna start just playing video games that simulate working, then we desperately need that universal basic income to actually come into existence to balance that out. Moving on, the open world sandbox civilization game 9 Yen Sutra Immortal has been announced for PC. Yeah. I don't know what 9 yen would mean, or Yen Sutra would mean. Gears of War E-Day multiplayer reveal trailer and developer overview is available on Komatsu if you want to check that out. I think maybe it's somewhat fair that there isn't a lot of enthusiasm around Gears of War E-Day at this point. It's kind of hard to get hyped around anything Microsoft is doing after all of the negative press, certainly, that Microsoft has created for itself. This game is supposedly coming out in October. Also seeing a game called Wobbly Life, which definitely feels like a friend slop game. So I'm just gonna not put it on the follow list because I don't see anything here super interesting. Wobbly Life is coming to the Switch 2 on August 20th. The Famitsu sales from the 20th to the 26th have been updated. Splatoon Raiders in the #1 spot. And then I guess the competition now may very well be between Nintendo Switch 1 games and Switch 2 games more than Nintendo games and PlayStation games. E-Baseball barely made it into the top 10 for the PS5. Yeah, and I'm not sure that the chart has changed any other way other than that one new Splatoon game. The numbers probably changed, but the items didn't. Or maybe it's just the 11 through 30 numbers, with Splatoon 3 being in the 11th spot that were added. Croc 2 Kingdom of the Gobos Remaster has been announced for the PS4 and 5, Xbox Series and Switch and PC. Here we can see that this is coming soon. By the way, this is the highlight carousel that I am trying to speed up, and I just cannot figure out how it works. Speed it up when you don't have the mouse over it. After about 5 seconds, it will jump forward. I would prefer it to jump forward way faster than that. Let's see, Mexican Ninja launches August 20th, which isn't there something called like a Cabarero or something that would be the closest thing to a Mexican Ninja? It does feel like you are weirdly mixing things that don't need to be mixed in that case. Yeah, I guess I'll just leave the title at that. We'll see when this game comes out if people like it or not. Eruda is how I'm going to pronounce that. It's coming to the PS4 and 5 and Switch. What kind of game is that? Side-scrolling action adventure game. Okay, it looks like there's some stuff going on here, so I'll put this on the wish list. But I am gonna also have to start to think as far as categories. And I definitely am thinking about that. I have different kid categories. If there's a game I thought was specifically good for a kid, I probably am never going to use those categories, so I probably should just delete them now. But yeah, either you're going to make categories for specific tags that are more important to you, like side-scrolling or anime, or I'm gonna have to think of some completely different kind of category to think about to categorize games. But the goal certainly will be to not just add everything to a dumping pile by default on the wish list. A dumping pile that then will never get sorted. Which maybe that is a big problem with a lot of people as far as getting projects done, is that a lot of things do just get dumped into a pile and then a pile never gets dealt with. Let's see, a game called Dragon Sword Awakening sales have topped 200,000. PlayStation and network versions are underway. There's something called the Defiant. Might be something interesting. A second Sino-Japanese war first-person shooter called the Defiant adds a PS5, Xbox Series versions. It certainly would be weird to play a Japanese first war-based first-person shooter. I don't know anything about the Second Sino-Japanese War at all, so it'd be risky to even start to play a game like that, knowing how the Japanese military of the past certainly isn't looked upon with positivity in modern days. Maybe that is why there's so much fantasy and set in different world content that is made by Japanese these days, is because they don't have a lot of history that they want to mention. Although if that was true, then you would think that Germany would be overflowing with some kind of large amount of fantasy, whether it's anime or something else too, and not really the case. Let's see, a game called X-Tetra. I don't know how you'd pronounce that. For the PS5, Switch 2, and Switch, launches September 3rd. Which we can see that with 18 user reviews on Steam, this is the game to leave the fall list. Yeah, this is the game where you have to kiss your female partners to give them power, and almost certainly when those types of gimmicks are thrown into a game around a generic dungeon crawling game mechanic in particular, you know that there's probably not much going on in the game. Let's see, Demon's Night Fever launches October 22nd. It's a speedrun training simulation RPG. That's how they're describing it. But yeah, I don't know about this game, but it's good enough to at least put on the fall list. Then we have Stupid Never Dies, seemingly having a release date. So this is the problem of these tabs still opening on the left for some reason. Yeah, it launches October 21st. So pretty much anytime something has a release date, I'm putting it on the fall list and making a new YouTube short on it. At that point, that gives these games that bother to put out announcements 2, maybe 3 YouTube shorts instead of just 1. 1666 Amsterdam gameplay feature number 2, Noah and Aaron trailer. I was listening to a YouTube content creator, a group of them actually, trying to remember this game, and they totally did not catch the 666 in the name, so they were saying like 1846 or 1866, and I'm like, no, the whole gimmick here is the 666, and they didn't want to set it in 666. So they added the 1. But it also certainly highlights just the confusion that having a number in your title can create, particularly considering there are several Anno games with different numbers in them that already exist and confuse it further. We have Timbleweed Park 2 apparently just being announced, so I'll make a short on that, but I'm not gonna put it on the fall list. Yeah, I think the first game probably was received well enough, obviously, to get a sequel made. Although a lot of times it does definitely feel like it's less to do with the success of a game and more to do with the determination of the creators of the game to make a sequel. Next we have a game called Kinky Spiritual Affairs Bureau for Switch 2. Yeah, I don't know if Kinky here is being used incorrectly or if I'm mispronouncing that. I'd imagine it might very well be that it's being mistranslated, and it should be better translated and localized as something as spooky Spiritual Affairs Bureau or bizarre Spiritual Affairs Bureau. And this may very well be a just direct translation versus localization issue. The game itself is rated very positively, although I'm not sure that I really would want to play this game. But I'm not even going to consider games that are on the wish list, whether I want to remove them from the wish list unless it's just blazingly obvious to me that that's the case. We have Dungeon Antiqua 2, which definitely looks like a Final Fantasy 1 or 2 type game. I don't think I'd ever play anything like that. It's coming to the PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch on August 20th. Tensai game Karma X Cross launches August 6th in Japan. Doesn't have a Steam link. Lost and Found, a This Bed We Made story launches August 5th. Apparently it's a standalone 1 to 2 hour experience. Sequel story to This Bed We Made, which I don't recall. This Bed We Made is a game. Well, I do want to add this to the follow list. That's all we do. Want to find This Bed We Made and open that up first. This Bed We Made is rated extremely positively. And frankly, does look fairly different. Third-person mystery game. Single player only. Yeah. And see, this is one of those cases where, having seen this right now, I'd like to be able to put it in a hype category of some sort. But I'm going to have to think about what that would look like. Do I need to make just like a 1-star, 5-star system as far as how excited I would be about a game? Does that really even matter? Because wouldn't that change over time potentially? So yeah, I'm going to have to think about how a hype category might play. A Kinetic Publishing showcase has been set for August 12th, revealing the first wave of games from Kinetic Publishing. Which feels like Kinetic Publishing may be new as a publisher. The Sinking City 2 Meet for the Grind Maws extended gameplay trailer is available if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. This is still waiting for it to come out. Then our last Gamatsu article is Pokemon Pokopia DLC Expansion Pass Part 1 Bubbly Basin launches August 5th alongside a version 2.0.0 update. Which, yeah, I think people still probably are playing Pokemon Pokopia and will continue to play it as long as it gets a decent amount of good quality updates. Now, I am noticing here that I have only one Gaming on Linux article open at all. Steam Beta is adding HDR streaming to on the Steam Deck OLED. I feel like the Steam frame may actually be in the hands of some reviewers too. High dynamic range streaming is an interesting thing. I wonder if that would actually make that many games look that much better. Anyways, I'm going to take a break at this point and I'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. We have the gamedeveloper.com articles left, and then the games on Steam to go through, and then we'll be done for today. Of course, the problem of not really getting going until like 5 or 6 in the evening and then finishing at 9 is that the legitimate things you're actually going to accomplish are pretty limited for the remaining 8 hours you might be awake or so. Let's see. The Xbox CEO declares priorities after the quote reset. She lays out a plan to get Xbox back on track after the latest round of layoffs, which it is nice to see that there is a plan. Maybe you should have put that out before you laid off 1,600 workers. 4Cs framework around core, content creation, and connection. Doesn't sound too much like a plan as it sounds like a cheap logo. Let's go through the words. The core of Xbox is pretty much non-existent. I wanted to say rotten, but I would say it's pretty much non-existent. How can you really have a core of Xbox when the vast majority of Xbox was built up and created around acquisitions? If you're going to get to the core of Xbox, it would be original Microsoft employees making video games, which would be maybe Xbox Game Studio and games potentially like Minecraft and not Minecraft, Minesweeper. Minecraft they acquired, that totally wouldn't be core. So if they really were going to focus on core, that would mean that they are really going to get rid of all their acquisitions, and I don't think they're getting rid of all their acquisitions. So that's stupid. Content makes sense. Like, video game developers should be about content, except for the fact that they sell hardware, which also there's no hardware element in these 4Cs, which you definitely would want to try to find some kind of C word for the hardware in Project Helix, which is not being mentioned here, which maybe that means Project Helix is not going to be a major priority. Next one is creation, and creation and content I feel like are basically the same concepts, because if you really separate them out like this, just so you have 4 words you can say starting with C, then you're implying that you want to create a lot of bad, uncreative content, and you want to create some creative content. And then connection, I assume should have been community. Maybe Asha Sharma doesn't understand the word community, having, just so coldly laid off a bunch of people, but in fairness, a lot of CEOs probably don't understand community. If it was like internet connection or wireless connection, that would be pretty stupid that would be a core thing. So connecting with the gamers, which you certainly don't do that by laying off 1,600 workers again. In practice, the plans include placing console front and clear center, prioritizing major franchises, making Minecraft the world's creator platform, and extending transmedia plans. I guess maybe that's where the creation is different from content, but still kind of the same words. Core audience maybe is what she means by core, as far as keeping people on Game Pass and Windows in general. And there's 2 more points I guess I want to make here. Is one, these kinds of announcements maybe shouldn't be so public, and they seem to be very much just being put out publicly instead of leaked. And two, this really feels like you're talking to kids or people you think are stupid by jumping around and making 4Cs as far as what you want to focus on. And these kinds of things, as far as this is the way we want the company to be run, really have no connection down the ladder as far as associate level employees and low level management who are doing their own thing and are just going to ignore these kinds of announcements. This is very much a case where do not listen to the words of a CEO, listen to the actions of a CEO. And so far, this CEO actions has been to lay off a bunch of people without really, I think, doing a good enough job of vetting who is being laid off for what reasons. If there was legitimate vetting going on, it wouldn't have been such a quick rush to lay off people. And you would have put out this kind of "this is the way we're going forward" message first to see if you could just get a decent amount of people who don't want to be on board with those changes to quit themselves. Because now you've potentially laid off 1,600 workers, and it may be down to the numbers you like, but you're almost certainly going to lose a couple of people by changing the direction of the way the company is run with this announcement. And next we have a GameDeveloper.com article, "The Truth Behind the Resurrection of Point P, Back from the Dead and Better Than Ever." Which I guess the question here is, do you really need this many paragraphs? Yeah. This is one of the longest articles I've seen on GameDeveloper.com, and I cannot diffuse it down to what is the truth, because I bet there really isn't much of a truth, and this really just feels like a advertisement, which is also very weird for GameDeveloper.com because they tend not to have advertisements hidden as articles, but who knows what may have changed. I'll have to keep an eye out. Let's see. Unity is bringing dedicated engine support to Netflix games. The engine maker says it wants to help developers produce titles for Netflix's multi-platform ecosystem. I don't know what game this is. And here we have very much more in line with what we tend to see from GameDeveloper.com. 3 sentences. Apparently, Netflix games like Unhinged, Black Mirror, Thronglets, and Squid Game Unleashed have already been made in Unity. I could see this being probably not Squid Game, but maybe Black Mirror, Thronglets. Let's see if we open an image in a new tab. I was hoping the file name might tell me something, but the file name is obfuscated. It's just a bunch of, well, no. Its file name is Unity_Netflix. Okay, that tells me nothing. Let's see. I don't know if this has so much to do with video games, but we have an article, "If Knowledge is Power, Why Are Some Game Companies Setting It Alight?" I wonder who knows the answers to the finicky production questions. Let's hope they weren't just laid off. So yeah, this is an editorial, and this is typically the times you get these longer articles. And this is the one reason why you may not want to document your work, is that you get laid off and then somebody can't easily replace your programming and your code. That being said, you can also document and archive it, so there are much better reasons to document your code. But yeah, this is basically just editorializing over the brain drain that inevitably is happening based off people being laid off. Although it may not be as much brain drain as people might catastrophize it to be, because a lot of people getting laid off may not have been that good of programmers in the first place, or they may have been great programmers, but they're not using like the newest engines and then the way things would be programmed now. Certainly, I still feel like object-oriented programming, which was the thing that was pushed and taught for a very long time, probably was a mistake for C++ programming, and because of that, there might be a lot of people who do still think in terms of objects when programming, when they really shouldn't. It is also worth definitely saying that what you can do following tutorials online and what you can do in the Godot engine is so many fewer lines of code and so much easier, and it is very much in game engines that the majority of people who are programming very basic things, and the rendering engine, the physics engines, all of that is just very high level code that is hidden in the back that is programmed by the genius people. And that there's almost certainly always been a split between people who program as a job and then people who are good at programming as a job or a passion. Moving on, Xbox revenue fell by $1.7 billion during the fiscal 2026. Flagging sales have become the new norm for Microsoft. That seems very believable. The Tencent-owned Lightspeed LA is laying off staff. The Last Sentinel developer attributes the job cuts to a shift in creative and development direction for the project. Okay. So, yeah, we can't go more than a couple days before there's more layoff announcements. Epic Games has hired the former head of Blizzard's Battle.net. Martin Kelly is now the vice president and general manager of Epic Games Store and Epic Online Services. I don't know if there's really a comparison to be made between Epic Online Service and Battle.net. They both are probably not the services you want to use. Meanwhile, if that's all he has as his resume, then I don't feel like much has really changed that would matter to me. It would be a lot more irritating to find out that people who worked at Blizzard and made StarCraft have now been hired by Epic Games, because that might mean that there is a StarCraft type game that's made for Epic and stays as an Epic Games Store exclusive, which I'd find that irritating, instead of potentially a StarCraft spiritual successor coming out on Steam, where I would like it to come out on. Of course, the possibility certainly exists that most of the people at Blizzard who are actually influential or good at making games left a long time ago. And the only example I can really think of off the top of my head is the Marvel Snap. Ben Brode, who made, or at least was attributed to having made Hearthstone, moving over to making Marvel Snap, which, yeah, I assume Marvel Snap is still going, but it's probably not too far from hitting a maintenance mode and being shut down, or losing its license with Marvel. Let's see. On Steam, which it's kind of a weird game, it's a mobile first game. On Steam though, its all-time peak was only 18,000. Came out in 2023. Its current peak of 24 hours is 2,901. And I don't think Marvel Snap was ever particularly that good. Let's see, that would be Second Dinner as the developer. Let's see if we trying to get to Second Dinner. It's a website, but doesn't seem like it can. New seasons still happening, which I think also just highlights that there's some people still playing it, but it would be really hard to get back into it. Which is true for most of these games. Is that if you are going to get into any kind of mobile game, anything with seasonality, anything that's constantly being updated, you have to get in on it day one to be a free-to-play player, or you're just going to fall too far behind. And I'm not even logged into Twitter. Facebook would be pointless. Instagram would be pointless. You could potentially look at their YouTube thing. It seems like they're hiring. There's been Broad. Yeah. They made a final welcome video 4 years ago, and that was it. And you can see this is kind of a smaller team, and it's probably a bunch of young kids, and Ben Broad may be the only person there. So yeah, unfortunately it is one of those cases where the idea of people going and starting their own companies is centered around a real assumption that that will work. So apparently they are hiring right now for a senior animator for an unannounced super fun video game contract at $60,000 to $70,000 per year, which seems very low compared to the user interface user experience for an unannounced super fun video game, which is a remote job paying $220,000 to $260,000 a year. That is, yeah, it's a 7, 14, 21, that's 3 times as much on the top end, and 60, 120, 180, nearly 4 times as much on the low end. And then there is a senior director engineer for $270,000 to $300,000, and it offers equity, which would potentially be even more. And so apparently they are working on a super fun video game compared to a non-super fun video game, or possibly they are in a holding space where they can't go forward until they have the talent. I don't know what Ashby is. It's probably a job listing site thing. And that pay very well may not be enough considering where the job may be located. Meanwhile, Disney owns Marvel, and Marvel probably isn't going to make a Marvel Snap 2 or do anything with Marvel Snap. They didn't really promote it, and that's the problem with most DC and Marvel games too, is that unless it is something huge, it doesn't get promoted enough, and it never gets promoted by Marvel and DC in any way that I recognize. Like, I don't see commercials on Hulu, for instance, for Marvel things. I don't log into Disney Plus, so maybe there's more Marvel ads showing up there. And I don't read Marvel or DC comics, so it is possible that those games may be advertised to the comic book nerds, but that's not a big enough audience. Weirdly, the San Diego Comic-Con has very often now become not about comics, but it's usually about movie announcements. It's not usually the place where even Marvel video games would get shown off. Or DC video games would be shown off. Alright, let's go through all the games on Steam. Same old process that is the new process, in that I swipe down still to close pages that I don't find interesting. If I do find it interesting, I'll hit a hotkey to probably put it on the follow list. If it's something like VR or something that I don't want to put on the follow list, though, I'll just hit a different hotkey to make the files to potentially make YouTube Shorts. The progress on replacing the scheduler for YouTube Shorts scheduling is still going forward, and it promises that things might move incredibly fast. So it might be, instead of running a macro and then letting it run on my computer for hours, it might be running a Violent Monkey script for the matter of minutes. Which, yeah, I am a little worried that that might be too fast for Steam, so I may have to throw in some extra delay, or too fast for YouTube. But yeah, if there's no problem there, I don't think this looks good enough, then I may very well accidentally program myself out of excuses to do something else. It may very well be the case that at the end of a stream like this, things will just get scheduled and uploaded super fast, and I will never really have an excuse to do things off my computer. Whoops. That one I just took off the follow list. I'll leave that on the follow list. There's a real problem, though, that we've already been going to now 2.5 hours, and because of that, I'm not really mentally energized enough to look at games that are on the follow list and decide whether or not I want to leave them on the follow list or whether I want to add them to the wish list. Game Grumps is playing this game. I'm not sure. This is very possibly just yet another simulator game I don't want to play, though. And this is the reason why I want to speed up the slideshows. I wanted the slideshow to move this fast, which it can do, but I haven't figured out how to make it work. And it may very well be that I just have to simulate the clicking, which was the thought I had. So I could just simulate clicking this button much faster. I'd preferably like to change the time overall, but also if it's going to take me another day to try and figure out how to get that to work, then the cheat way is probably the better way to go. One of the things I realized is that as I'm implementing some code to block other JavaScript script files from loading, I should be working from the bottom on the way up, because every time I reload the page, if the very bottom script doesn't load and it's still going, then I know it's not that script that is at least initializing the slideshow. So then you just work to the second to the last script file, and then the one before that, then the one before that, and work your way up. And eventually you will hit something that breaks it, but you'll hit the thing that breaks it moving from the bottom up. That is most likely going to have the initialization code instead of just support functions and other code that the initialization code uses. If you start from the top down, almost certainly a lot of things are going to break. Oh yeah, a lot of RoboVacs are being banned, it seems. Or at least that's the fear-mongering speculation at the moment in the United States, for fear of spying. Which I'm glad I have a RoboVac, but in all honesty, I also haven't had a clear enough floor to have the RoboVac work in probably a year and a half. So all it's done is sit around in its charger. I'd like to correct that pretty soon. It's just a lot of things I'd like to do. Definitely I'm running into a problem where in this case I have a project that I'd very much like done, because it will almost certainly save me some money, which is to rewrap the umbilical cord of my condenser unit of my air conditioner. And I have the stuff. The shopping is the easy part, but I really don't have anybody that can do it for me, and I can do it myself, I suppose, but it would exhaust me quite a bit. It is very hot outside. That is also why it needs to be done, though. Although in fairness, really haven't had a lot of luck of hiring people to do things. They just don't do things with any kind of level of care or quality. So it does kind of feel like you may have to just do everything yourself. It certainly has become a much easier experience going through the games on Steam now that we're not looking at things with AI disclosures on them. It still is a pretty decent amount of bad games, adult games that should be in the adult section, and just stuff that We've seen the flooding in the markets for a long time. Yeah, here's a online PvP game. 24-hour peak is 31 people. So it's almost certainly not a game that would be playable in a couple of months. Which I don't know how many people think of things from that perspective. As far as, am I buying this game for longevity if it is online only? Or player versus player only? They probably should think from that direction. There's a decent number of games that came out, and overall just a lower number of games in total that I had to look at. Yeah, I'm not sure when, if ever, I would realize that there's a bunch of games I'm not seeing because I'm blocking things that have used AI, and they're disclosing that they used AI. And this faultless cleanup going this way still doesn't really work. It is also still strange that it doesn't seem like you have a way of getting emailed this information. Yeah. Should look into that at a different time. Yeah, even taking probably a longer break than I needed to, today still has managed to stay under 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is definitely getting these streams to be a lot more reasonable. I almost wonder if I could get away with getting rid of Video Games Chronicle as a news source and bringing this down to even 2.5 hours. But yeah, 2 to 3 hours is the giant bombcast length back in the day. At least that was how long they would go. So that does seem to me like that is pretty much just how long it takes. Although in fairness, the bombcast talked about far fewer games and did it once a week, covering a week's worth of news in 2.5 hours. It's not just 3 days worth of news. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.